All of this week, I want to honour those among us who dedicate their lives to helping those who need it in the form of caring, even if it means putting their own hopes and dreams to one side, and in some cases doing that for an indefinite period. Most often it's for a son or daughter, or a wife or husband or partner, but that doesn't make the sacrifice that they make any less powerful or less impressive. It's Carers Week this week. It's a time to recognise and celebrate the something like 2.65 million Australians who are carers, who provide care and support to a family member, or in some cases just a family friend. Carers don't seek out this sort of attention, but they also don't deserve to be left in the dark in the homes that are their workplaces. If this week is about nothing else, it's about at least recognising those who have made the choice to devote either part of their time or all of their time and energy into supporting a loved one who needs them. JimToohey is Chair of Carers Queensland, and I sat down for a chat with Jim last week about the carers who inspire him every day.
Travelling around the state over many years now and talking to people face to face at what we call our carer conversations, where we invite carers who are in Roma or Townsville to come to a venue that we select, and for us to hear their stories so that we can ensure when we speak to government, we're not speaking as an organisation that hasn't really listened to people. That's informed me most because I've spoken to people there who deserve the civilian equivalent of a VC for what they've done.
Yeah.
People who've spent decades of their lives caring for someone that they love or they know, often without recognition, prior to the NDIS, without much financial support, and have sacrificed so much of what you and I would regard as part of a normal way of life, socialising, working, engaging with the community. That's what's really impacted me.
You raise a good point there in terms of the paid versus unpaid, because I think there are many myths that the general public probably have about carers unless they've been in that role in some form themselves. And one of them would be, well, if you become a carer, then you automatically get some sort of a payment from the government. It may not be much, it may need to be raised, and it's not, but there is some payment there. But tell me about the reality of paid caring versus unpaid caring, and who gets paid and who doesn't.
And look, it's important to acknowledge that there's always been financial support for people who are carers and aren't able to work or to seek work because of their caring responsibilities. So that's absolutely correct. One of the myths, I think, David, is that that's enough to fund a substantial lifestyle setting. It wasn't. Of course, now we have the NDIS, we have the aged care home care program, where paid carers have taken up an enormous amount of the work previously undertaken by unpaid carers. But it still remains the case that unpaid carers are the backbone, the foundation of caring for that individual, because they're generally people who live with them or people who see them regularly. They often provide that emotional support, that spiritual support. So both of them are working well, and the NDIS has been a great program and something that's freed carers' time up. But they're always still going to be integral to the lives of the people that they care for, even if it's only advocacy, David, speaking up for the person, helping them to interact with the NDIS or indeed organisations like Carers Queensland.
There would still be a lot, I would imagine, of carers who are either full-time or they care for a relative who doesn't need absolute full-time vigilant 24-hour care, but they certainly need to live in the homes of the person caring for them, and that person, when they get home from work, they're basically swapping one job for another. Are there a lot of carers who perhaps don't even recognise that they are entitled to something, or that they are actually officially a carer?
Oh, great question. Because I don't know how many times I've heard from a carer, well, I'm not a carer, I'm her mum.
Yep.
I'm not a carer, I'm her husband or his wife. So that's really got to be acknowledged, because there are many people out there who say, well, I'm just doing what I do because I love this person, I care for this person, or I know this person, they live next door to me, whatever. The fact remains that they have sacrificed much of what the rest of us take for granted to do that. And is that sufficiently recognised, monetarily or otherwise? That's another question. What we hope to do in Carers Week is to say we just want it to be recognised in the eyes of everyone around them, that we understand what you're doing, we understand the sacrifices that you've made, we understand your everyday commitment to caring for this person with a disability, an aged care related like dementia, something like that, because it's what most of us don't have to experience. Two particular scenarios which are common always speak out to me about this. That is meeting a mother, and generally they're mothers in their 40s or 50s who are beginning to feel, some of the constraints of aging on themselves, who've cared for 20 years for a son or a daughter who's profoundly disabled, live with them. The NDIS has been great. It's picked up a lot of the physical workload there, but they're still the person at night that will get up out of bed and hold their daughter or their son's hand when they're crying and they're upset. Or someone who's caring for a spouse who has dementia. Recently, an 85-year-old man I was talking to whose wife is profoundly affected with dementia, and he said, I thought when we got old, we would travel overseas. When we retired, we'd travel overseas, we'd do things, but she suffered dementia, started suffering dementia about 8 years ago, and his whole life now is a day-to-day caring for her. She's got a home care package, which is great, so there's a lot of physical assistance provided. This is about recognising the sacrifices that those people make.
Living embodiment of, for better or worse, aren't they, really?
And that's a wonderful way of putting it, David.
Yeah, it's incredible. You're right. And it's said often that, part of the purpose of Carers Week is to at least give them the recognition that they deserve. But couched in there in that discussion, you did certainly concede that in terms of financial recognition, it's nowhere near enough. Is that something that you think that the government will ever come to the party on, to recognise and actually pay carers enough that recognises the value of what they do?
Well, as I said, there's always been a recognition financially of carers. It's always been there. I think the support that carers most need is when there is a significant reduction in their day-to-day duties due to the NDIS, support for things like helping them to retrain, to perhaps get some employment, re-enter the workforce. The first example I used, because it's one I've come across a lot, is the mother I'm speaking to who's cared for 20 years, has now got an NDIS package for her son or daughter that's lifting a lot of that physical load. And they're saying, I'd like to get some part-time work. Someone from the NDIS will be there. I haven't put a resume together, David, for 20 years. I haven't been to an interview. I feel like I have no skills. I feel like I have no value other than being a carer for this person. That's where we need to be really focusing our resources to say to carers, you'll always be a carer for this person because you want to be and you need to be, and we accept that. But let's help you to get some of the day-to-day stuff the rest of us take for granted happening for you, such as maybe finding some part-time work, getting a resume together. Let's help you in Carers Queensland and others. Let's help you to train and prepare for an interview.
Absolutely.
So that you're getting some of the experience the rest of us, David, take for granted.
And I would imagine part of that too would be at least recognising or working out a way to translate the value of actually being a carer with all of the vigilance and responsibility that takes, and selling that for what it is, which is it may not be a university degree or a TAFE certificate, but I mean, by golly, it's in a job that's really is make or break, and they've succeeded in it. So that's got to be worth something, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And look, the Carer Friendly Business Awards, which Carers Queensland is hosting next Tuesday, that's precisely what we focus on. We focus on businesses that have recognised, listen, an employee who's there every day on time, without exception, to help the person that they care for, to be there for the person. That's a fantastic characteristic. And it's surprising how many, it's not surprising, it's heartening how many businesses recognise that. And so, employing a carer and also ensuring that we provide flexible workplace arrangements so they can also undertake their caring responsibilities. We're getting a great deal. We're getting someone that'll front up every day.
Yep.
We're getting a commitment from someone who understands what commitment means.
That's right, and
It's
they're not going to slack off because they've never
No,
been able to, and now
no,
it's
they can't.
tattooed on their brain, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
What's the next big challenge that you would like to achieve?
Look, speaking for the organisation, we have undertaken a great reflection into what works best for carers in the new NDIS environment. It's helping them to re-enter paid employment and the workforce on whatever basis is right for them. We've established a registered training organisation. We've got some great financial support from the federal government to build and develop that training organisation, specifically focusing on carers, because we think that's a great gateway for them to re-engage with what the rest of us take for granted. The second thing would be making sure or hoping that people in the community recognise there might be someone living down the road from you. It's like the man I spoke about with his wife with dementia, or the mother with a daughter with cerebral palsy. You know what? If you do recognise or know someone like that, if you're having a barbecue on Sunday with your friends, how about invite that person? The socialisation aspect is so critical to carers. They feel isolated. They feel like they're not part of the community. If you can do something that makes them feel like they are part of a community, even if it's in your street or in your neighbourhood, that will make so much difference to them. I promise you it will.
JimToohey is Chair of Carers Queensland and got a lot of carer stories to share with you at this time each day. This week it is Carers Week right around Australia, honouring the fact that there are 2.65 million Australians who provide care and support to a family member or friend, and recognising and celebrating that all this week. It's 1 to 8.
The modern miracle